Taurus Sun and Rising. Welcome to a video on the transit of Jupiter in Aries, which is happening in 2022 and 2023 at various times. It's Raina here, and I will get into the exact dates of the transit, but I will say that as I record this, Jupiter is poised to go into Aries on May 10th, which happens to be Taurus season. So for Taurus, Aries is a sign before you, so it's in the house before you, which is the 12th house. However, it is important to note that, like if you're listening for your rising sign and therefore your natal chart, which is really going to be about your natal placements, and your natal chart will be the tool that is often used for predictive astrology because it is kind of the template of when you're born. That's how the chart is constructed at the exact time of your birth. And so these events that are occurring take on special significance as it pertains to your daily life. So in that particular case, especially, your chart may be an unequal house system. And when because I have Taurus rising, I have Aries and Taurus in that 12th house. And I'm a late degree Taurus rising. So it's not just necessarily one transit of Jupiter that's going to be in your 12th house. You might have it also in Taurus for a bit. And you probably will because of, the degree of Taurus you're in. So the point being that this can be, the dates that I give may not dovetail exactly about when Jupiter's going to enter that 12th house. But at least you get some idea because eventually it will happen sooner or later. So the 12th house is the house that Pisces and its ruler Neptune rule in the universal chart. And it's all about spiritual matters. I call it the hermit house because it's associated with solitude, contemplative activities, meditation, and all of that stuff is really fun if you can get into that mindset. To just be alone meditating in nature can be wonderful, but sometimes people feel like they don't have the opportunity to do those things. Maybe they're surrounded by people all the time, or they are working a lot. So Jupiter in the 12th house can expand your ability to do these kinds of spiritual retreats or contemplative periods of time, and you are enhanced by it. And that's a big point to make, is that when you are doing these things, your life will align. And I say this too with wherever Jupiter is in your natal chart as well. They will say, oh, that's lucky for you, that area. But I would, rather than just say lucky, I would say there's an alignment, there is an expansion, so your life opens up more, you have more growth opportunities. So before I continue, I just want to give a shout out to cafeastrology.com. I've been finding their compilation of information about Jupiter in the houses to be very helpful, and I use it as a reference point. Because Jupiter isn't a practical house and it's more concerned with past lives, karma, the dream state, the unconscious mind, for Taurus, you may not think that it's going to do much of anything. And it might be a subtle influence, that's possible. But it still can benefit your life. And especially for an earth sign like Taurus, it can be helpful because it nudges you in the direction of spirituality. Taurus being an earth sign and the first earth sign, you revel in the senses. And that's something that comes naturally to you, but you're not just a physical being, you're a spiritual being having a having a physical experience. And while the physical side may be something that you have a great affinity for, it's wonderful to develop your spiritual side. And some of you may go to church every Sunday, and that's wonderful. But that's more what I would call religiosity than spirituality. You know, you check off all the boxes, you go to church or mass or temple, on Sunday morning or Saturday or whenever you go, and then you can go and watch the football game. And because you've done your whatever your chore is, or your or your task. But I'm talking about the spiritual path, which means that your life becomes all about spirituality. Not that you become a religious fanatic, but that you see the spiritual in everything. And everything can become a meditation too. Taurus is a very deliberate sign. It's very mellow. I mean, maybe if you have if you're sun in Aries and you have a lot, as sun in Taurus and you have a lot of Aries inner planets, you might not be as mellow as I'm making you out to be, but in many cases you will be, that you love nature. And when you can take those qualities and then also apply them to the spiritual, using natural settings as a place of retreat, spending the day alone on the banks of a river, and not doing anything and not needing to do anything, that can be wonderful. So the 12th house is the house where selflessness is front and center. And there have been several houses that are associated with volunteer work and, altruism, meaning that you're doing something for its own benefit, not to benefit you. And because Taurus rules the second house of earned income, it's always good for Taurus to do these things. So not this tit for tat situation where you're giving with the hopes of getting. And it can be very, very, I think it can help your spiritual growth to do that. And it can also just expand your life in general. And you never know. Sometimes when people volunteer, they find out they're able to gain from it. Even like, for instance, if somebody volunteers and they happen to be unemployed and they eventually get hired for a certain type of job, then that does benefit the person, rather than them sitting around feeling sorry for themselves or actually helping other people. Well, me saying that was actually contradictory, because that's not what this is supposed to be about. But I'm just saying that the nature of Jupiter is that it is beneficial to the individual. So even if you're coming into it with the vibe that you're just doing it altruistically, it might still benefit you. I just don't want people to do things hoping for a benefit. That's the point. Because the 12th house is the house of self-sacrifice in the best possible way, not in a victim mentality. 12th house can be victimization. So this is why we have to do things with a very clear intention of why we're doing them. And that brings me to a point that connects with that. Since this is the 12th house in the more challenging aspect is about being self-destructive. It's a house of self-undoing. And this is because it's Pisces' house. Pisces has this reputation of having addictions, of being the victim. And so that is where that comes from. And Jupiter can help anyone who has addictions, who has a tendency to self-sabotage. So you can get a handle on some of these behaviors that act against you when Jupiter is here. And it may involve different things. I would say especially a spiritual practice or a spiritual teacher. Jupiter is the ruler of the 9th house of Sagittarius, and that's a spiritual teacher. And you might find somebody that you feel very comfortable with, who you really agree with their outlook on life and their attitude towards spirituality. Sometimes people have phobias. That can be 12th house. You can get rid of them. Guilt, like especially irrational guilt, which I think if you look at if you're listening for your rising sign, then this is for your natal chart. And if you look at your natal chart and see in your particular 12th house any kind of planets that might be there, then that can indicate that there is some kind of past life trauma or situation that needs to be resolved, that where the person comes into this lifetime with irrational guilt. Sometimes I will have clients who have Chiron in the 12th, for instance, and that's not a planet, it's an asteroid, but it has still, it's in the chart generating system that I get from astro.com, they include Chiron in the chart. And I don't know, maybe other sites do as well. I'm not sure. But I feel that it's significant enough for them to include it, because usually I don't talk about asteroids in my readings. And but there can be other things like Saturn in the 12th, the moon in the 12th can, point to certain tendencies, emotional tendencies that the person has. So being able to improve in these areas is very important, because otherwise you're saddled with this continual feeling of being the victim in your own life, and or that you are somehow responsible for everybody else. And that's not going to lead to anything positive. This can be the transit of a guardian angel appearing. So, I think that we all have guardian angels probably, but extra protection maybe. I also read somewhere, not on here, that Jupiter transiting your 12th house can be maybe good karma from another lifetime coming to fruition for you. So Jupiter sometimes can even be money. So maybe it's coming from an anonymous source, or just somebody giving it to you. There's no strings attached. Who knows? Maybe something like that. Your dream state may be much more intuitive. And the point of that isn't just to entertain you as a parlor trick or anything, or entertain other people, but it can provide you information that is very valuable. Also, I would imagine that if you have a tendency towards nightmares, you might have more positive types of dreams. So suffice it to say that any kind of course of study that's like metaphysical in nature, And also they mention dream interpretation, which, if that's something that appeals to you, by all means, go for it. And they mentioned research. I've heard of the eighth house being research. I'm assuming that because this is behind the scenes, that it is that kind of positive situation for expanding research. What I would say, even to broaden that, is anything that you do behind the scenes may be very lucky. So normally, if you're working on something and you broadcast it to other people, you might get a lot of praise and stuff like that, but it might be beneficial for you to work on a project and do it behind the scenes before you launch it, and not necessarily let everybody know what you're up to. That might be good for you for some reason. Yeah, and that's an important thing, is that the 12th house is a house of secret enemies. So Jupiter here can neutralize that. And I think when they were talking about guardian angel, I think that could be one of the things, where anybody who is trying to do anything is not going to get very far. So that's awesome. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Well, just in terms of your general demeanor, having more sensitivity, having more empathy for others. They also mention being compassionate. These are things that we should be doing anyhow, but sometimes it's not that easy. It's easier said than done, because we may be experiencing internal anger, resentment towards other people. And so this can be very helpful, even if we're talking about somebody who has done you wrong. It may help you to forgive somebody because you tune into them and their suffering. I think Taurus people do tend to hold grudges, and that kind of thing is, because you're a fixed sign, and so when you get fixated on something, it's hard to kind of let go. I've been trying to explain the concept of forgiveness to other people because it really is quite distorted. And, truth be told, even in my own life, sometimes I wonder if I am holding a grudge myself, because I've been experiencing a lot of memories coming up and my reaction to those memories of those people. And sometimes it isn't always positive. But at a deeper level, I know that I hold the space for the innocence of all people, ultimately. Not that they're expressing that in whatever they're expressing as innocence, but that anybody who is doing something that is against others is really suffering. Even if they seem like their life is going on and they're just having I want to say a gay old time, but I didn't want it to get misconstrued. I mean, that they're just really happy. They seem like they're just, nothing is affecting them. And sometimes I even fall into that trap of saying, oh, look at them. They're just like, they don't even realize what they've done to all these people in their life. And I can't imagine that. But then I think to myself, if somebody really is that disconnected from their behavior and they're just like kind of moving on and they're not making amends with the people that they've hurt, that means that there is a great disconnect, and it's to me it is a form of suffering, because they don't really know themselves. Because when you know yourself, you know when you screwed up. And so that's why it's so easy for people to be mean to people, to others, over and over and over again, even though it seems to burn bridges, because there's just this lack of awareness. So we can have compassion for that. We can have compassion for maybe if we know that they have had a difficult childhood, that they had trauma. I could see a Taurus person saying, but they, so what? I had trauma too, but I didn't allow that to make me act like a jerk to people all the time or be abusive or blah, blah, blah. Well, then consider yourself blessed, because it means that you were not traumatized to the point where you lost who you were and your connection to God. That you were able to see when you were doing wrong and correct your actions. Some people are really that lost. And it's a very precarious place to be. In any case, this can be very good for being compassionate without, see, you have to be compassionate without being a victim, though, and being I was going to say a schmuck, or some kind of a dupe, And that's because that's being hurting yourself. And you have to be compassionate and still have boundaries. The 12th house is not about boundaries. I'm not going to lie to you. That's the problem. It's very much about dissolving things so that we're all one, It's this cosmic soup. And yes, that is true, but we have to be able to navigate life with these things that seem contradictory, but they really are truths that you have to make space for. We are individual souls, but we're part of a collective soul at the same time. And so therefore we have our own spiritual path, and yet we are all one. We're not separate from other people. And that probably bothers a lot of Taurus people because they want everything to be concrete, just easy to digest and wrap up, no contradictory tendencies whatsoever. And no, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but the bottom line is love. And you may be filled with this love for others as your spiritual brothers and sisters, and that's beautiful. Okay, that's what I have for you, Taurus. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a personal reading, I'm promoting my double readings because they are more comprehensive, but I do have these readings separately. But when you buy them as a package, you're going to get what I consider a significant discount. One of them is called my deep dive reading, and it's an hour of chart analysis of your natal chart, your cosmic blueprint, what you came into this lifetime with, the planets in your different houses and all of that good stuff. And then an hour of the upcoming transits for the next 12 months. Not every transit, but some that I consider very important. And since for those of you who are Sun in Taurus people, this can be very good to kind of look at the trends that are coming up for you specifically as a Sun in Taurus, who also has a rising sign that is probably a different sign. So your natal chart is going to be completely different than the thing I'm describing here. And everybody's chart is not going to be in alignment with what I'm talking about here because of the degree of sun or rising. That's going to definitely make a difference of when these transits hit. So there's an hour of transits, and that's called my deep dive reading. And then if you like the tarot, I have an hour of chart analysis, or you can get the transits for the astrology part, you can choose that plus a full-length tarot reading for a special price. And that's called my whole enchilada reading. But if you really, are into astrology, I recommend the deep dive reading, just at least at the beginning, So that's what I have for you. You can find out more information at the link below. I'm at RainaMoonAstrology.com. Take care. Bye.